Welcome to this IUN Community Garden session, Preserving Indiana's Northwest Ecologies. And I am very glad to now turn it over to our presenters from the Nature Conservancy.
Thanks, Amanda. My name is Esmé Barniskis. I'm the Volunteer and Events Coordinator here at TNC in Indiana. And tonight I'm joined by Joel.Perez, who's the Southern Lake Michigan Rim Project Director, and Trevor Edmonson, who's the Kankakee Sands Site Manager. And today we're going to talk about the diverse Northwest ecologies of our Hoosier State and how you can get involved and more details about the biodiversity there and how you might want to participate in stewarding and participating in protecting our land. Our roadmap for today is pretty packed. We have a lot to cover. We've chosen to do a pretty comprehensive view of the Northwest part of our state. But we're also going to start with who the Nature Conservancy is. I know that we're a big organization that you may have a variety of levels of familiarity with. So we'll cover that. We'll talk about the Southern Lake Michigan Rim Project, dune and swale ecology. We'll talk about urban conservation challenges. And then we'll move to the Kankakee Sands Project, where we'll talk a lot about the prairie restoration and biodiversity there, as well as land management and the Bison program. And then we're going to wrap it up with how to get involved and some specific volunteer opportunities. And of course, we'll end with plenty of time for questions as well as our contact information. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and dive right into who the Nature Conservancy is. We're a global conservation nonprofit, and our mission is to conserve the lands and waters on which all life depends. And we do that through a variety of programs. We have over 400 scientists on staff, and we're very prevalent across the globe. We have a chapter in every United States state, as well as over 70 countries. And we work on programs relating to agriculture, freshwater conservation, forestry, and in total, we've protected more than 125 million acres of land. We also work on the water programs, and we have more than 100 marine conservation programs currently active. So very large and very huge. And here in Indiana, we're just one small piece of the puzzle. There's about 60 staff here in Indiana spread throughout the state, and there are seasonal crews. So sometimes it gets even larger than that. And we have nature preserves, over 80 in Indiana alone. And those total over 100,000 acres. And some of these preserves are very small and some are very large. Some are open to the public and have trails. Some are not currently open to the public or are limited in their access. So there are a variety of different landscapes. It's a variety of different kinds of experiences you'll have when you interact with our preserves, but we have plenty to offer, and I'm excited to share with all of you more about some specific ones. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Joel.
I am the Joel Perez, the director, the program director here for Project Office in Southern Lake Michigan Rim Project. I just want to talk a little bit about my project. Our office covers entire Northwest Indiana, mostly Lake County, from East Chicago all the way to Maryville. Our primary ecosystem that we work at is remnant dune and swale. So I'll be talking a little bit mostly about dune and swale here today. Our work is concentrated along the Grand Calumet River Conservation Area and Ivanhoe Nature Preserve, although we do help manage other sites along the Grand Calumet River. We do work with local partners on urban conservation projects as well, besides just the land stewardship that we do here. So we do quite a little bit of different things at our project office. Our staff are active land stewards doing restoration and maintenance, and they also help a lot with the urban conservation that we do here with the communities, and help leading hikes and programs with schools and things of that nature. And also we also hold the annual East Chicago Monarch Festival every September in East Chicago. Of course, because of COVID, we haven't had an in-person festival for the last 2 years. But we look forward to doing that again in the future. But we have been doing a lot of online stuff and other opportunities for engagement. All right, so with that, I want to zoom out a little bit. Next slide. Actually, I'm going to introduce my team first. Before I do that, I already introduced myself, Joel Perez. I actually was raised in East Chicago, so I'm really familiar with this area, and I'm really privileged to work for the area that I work in. I always like to share that because it's something that I'm really passionate about. And so, as the project director, I oversee all aspects of my office, all different parts of it. I mean, it would be way too many. It would cover the whole page if I were to write it all down. Also part of my team, we have Susie Mahalo, our conservation coordinator, grants manager, communication specialist. We have Carly Labasco, one of our restoration crew leaders, also land steward, seasonal staff manager, GIS and data manager, Jessica Fernandez, another restoration crew leader that we have, land steward, urban conservationist, contracts manager, and then Nathaniel Gatti, restoration steward assistant, and also our greenhouse manager. So pretty small team, and actually pretty new team. I just took the role of director just earlier this year, and I would say just about everybody on this team is currently new in the role within a year. So really young and new team. I'm looking forward to doing a lot more work and really seeing what the future holds for us here in Northwest Indiana and improve what already has been great work that has been done by Paul Lavius and the previous team. And of course, can never forget our seasonal crews that we hire every year. Our interns and volunteers are also part of the team. All right, now I want to zoom out. I grew up in East Chicago, as I mentioned, and I never really knew TNC worked so close to home until I started working for the Nature Conservancy. So I just wanted to sort of show you guys when we talk about the Grand Calumet River Conservation Area, when we talk about what, the sites that we manage, where are they at, located on this map. You see Lake Michigan there on the right. You see labels East Chicago and Gary. And really kind of those green spaces along the river that you see there are the sites that we either own or help manage. And I'll zoom in a little bit more specifically with the Grand Calumet Conservation Area, which has probably got the most obvious work done that we have seen over the years. Also, cool thing about this picture is you can really see Ivanhoe and Ivanhoe South. You can really see those swales right there in the middle of your map. All right, now that you have sort of an idea the proximity and really how fragmented our sites really are. Here I want to zoom into a network of sites that we manage. This is one that we're trying to focus on for the future to help improve access and improve trails and signage. And it's also one that has, as I mentioned before, seen a lot of work, and there's really been a difference. I can attest to that being from East Chicago and really seeing it from what used to be one of the most polluted rivers here in the U.S. To seeing wildlife really bounce back and come back. And so this is what, when we talk about Grand Calumet River Conservation Area, this is what we're talking about. And we're really talking about a series of properties that you see here. Grand Calumet River Black Tern Site, owned by the Indiana Department of Natural Resources. Steiner Dune and Swale, which is Shirley Hines land property. Grand Calumet Natural Area, which is the Nature Conservancy property. And then across the river on the north side, you have DuPont Natural Area, which is the only property here that does not currently have public access. All right, so you can go to the next one. All right, so before I go into the Dune and Swale, I really want to talk about the Grand Calumet River a little bit, because we wouldn't be where we are now without the work that was done there. And I mentioned before that it was one of the most polluted rivers at some point. You'll see there on the left picture, that's an actual picture, a real picture from somebody who did stick their hand in the river unsafely. But you can see how bad the river was. And over the last couple of years, there's been a lot of dredging and restoration of the river. A lot of those contaminants were removed. It is still being monitored till this day. But I wanted to show you kind of the before pictures of what that area looked like. And then I want to show you some after pictures. And so in the left and both left and right, you can really see how along the river, it's really choked out by Phragmites, also known as common reed. It's one of our bigger invasives that we deal with and manage on our properties. And so especially on the right-hand side, and this is a really cool feature that not a lot of people know about. So what you're seeing is DuPont there on the top north side of the river. And right there, you see a big gap kind of between the cottonwood trees and what would be a ridge there. That's at one point that actually was the mouth of the river, where it would, yep, there you go, where it would go into Lake Michigan. And so before Lake Michigan receded, and I'll go into that a little bit later when I talk about the formation of dune and swale. The river actually fed into Lake Michigan right there, and you could really see it right there in that curve. And all of that in this picture is currently choked out. In this picture, it's choked out by the Phragmites. And I'll show you guys a picture of what it looks like now, and after years of great restoration work. Next picture. And here's a little, still a little kind of in between. Not really after. First, we'll start on the left. That is a before and after at DuPont on one of the sites, and you can really see, all that Phragmites in the background there in the first picture. And the second picture after treatments and years of work, it's not as obvious in this picture, but really the diversity that just came back. And really an example of the diversity that could come back with just a little bit of work. The last picture there on your right is just showing you kind of the beginning process when they first initially cleaned out the river, and they removed a lot of the Phragmites for us. So they did that initial work, they removed the root mass, and so now you see that this what was used to be the mouth of the river. You see how they took away a lot of the Phragmites, and now it's just kind of bare ground. And we'll go to the next one. All right, and these are some pictures after what it looks like now. That first picture is also DuPont. Again, you can kind of see in the top right of that left picture that old Phragmites stands that was treated. You can still see signs of it, and you can still kind of see stalks even there in the swale. But that whole thing used to be choked out of Phragmites, and you really see a lot of diversity coming in. We're starting to see more wildlife come in. Same thing with the right two pictures. It's really amazing what can happen when you put a little bit of work into some of these sites. Next picture. And here I'm just showing you guys a picture of two bald eagles that were taken along the Grand Calumet River site. Just a great story. As I mentioned, I've lived here almost most of my life, and I've heard stories about the river, and I can share that with you guys some other time. But never had I seen a bald eagle. So I started working with the Nature Conservancy, and even within the first years that I was working here, they were not as common as they are now. And really, that's just proof of what you could do when you really restore these beautiful places. On the right hand side, again, DuPont, and I'm not going to say DuPont is my favorite, but it might be my favorite based on the pictures. Again, this is another one of those swales at DuPont that used to be covered in all Phragmites and had some restoration work done. That's actually in the fall season, and all what you're seeing there, the yellow flowers are Bidens. Not very fun when they seed because they stick to your pants. You don't want to go through that. But during this time, kind of in the fall, in September, it happens to be around the same time that the monarch butterfly is migrating down south. And so if that was full of Phragmites, those Bidens wouldn't have enough sunlight to be there, and you can't really see it from the picture here. But there's actually hundreds of monarchs nectaring on those Bidens. I couldn't capture it, but I'm telling you, I was there. I took the picture. There's hundreds of monarchs that nectar that they wouldn't have had if it was still choked out in Phragmites. Next. All right, so dune and swale, I mentioned this word dune and swale. So now that I can talk a little bit about, because it's really the project, the nature preserves that we manage are kind of separated into two parts, right? There's the river and the river edge, and then there's further inland, you have the dune and swale. And so I have these pictures. The picture on the left is today, and it's an area of what today is. And if you know Gary Airport, that's what's in the middle of the yellow square. And I wanted to compare it to a 1930s aerial of what that looked like, just so you can sort of see in something we'll talk about later, fragmentation and development, how it has really destroyed a lot of these last dune and swale sites here in this region. I also wanted to show you this picture because it really shows you and what I'm about to talk about, which is dune and swale. So with dune and swale is essentially a ridge, ridges that have these wetlands we call swales in between. Some hold more water than others, and when they hold water, they kind of look like this that you see on the right hand on your right side, kind of like a washboard, corn rows, or whatever you want to compare it to. But you really see those linear parallel lines on the right that you also see on the left, but of course it's a lot more fragmented, so it's really narrowed down to just our preserves, really, that remains, and a little bit of other pockets here and there. Next. And here I just wanted to show you what actually might look like today if you went out. This is Ivanhoe Nature Preserve, and just kind of a bird's eye view, picture by Susan Kurt, of what dune and swale looks like. And here you can really see what I talk about, those ridges and swale, ridge and swale, ridge and swale. And really, that's really one of the reasons why it's such a has a lot of biodiversity, because it has those different kinds of soils. It has, it has wet soils for all your wet loving plants, mesic, all the way to your dry soils on top of the ridges. So you really have a lot of diversity in such small little places. And it's really what makes them special. Some of our preserves, like Ivanhoe, are actually one of the most diverse places in the state of Indiana. And I'm just thinking about how small it is. I mean, we talked about having hundreds of thousands of acres here in Indiana, and really Ivanhoe only being about 100 acres, a little more than 100 acres. Next. And here's some more pictures of some of the biodiversity if you were out hiking at one of our sites that you might see. And again, you might see a prickly pear next to something that might like things a little more mesic, or your orchids next to some sedge, just within a couple feet of each other. Also on the left-hand picture, you see some birches, and some of our sites even have white pine and jack pine. And you really see a really big variety, large variety of diversity at our sites. And I'll give you some numbers here a little later. Next. And of course, for those that are not all excited about flowers, we also, our preserves are also important to a lot of amphibians, reptiles, birds, especially migrating birds, secretive marsh birds. I mentioned the monarch butterfly, how really important our sites are. We're right at it's called the Southern Lake Rim Project, because we're right there at the southern part of Lake Michigan. And a lot of times, a lot of those migrating species kind of funnel Lake Michigan, kind of force them to funnel through our area. So it's really important to save and protect these places, and that's why they're really important. There on the left, I wanted to show you that old river mouth that I talked about earlier in my presentation. That's what it currently looks like. And so you maybe can't tell from this picture, but you can really see that the structure has been building there, and it has only been a little bit over 5 years that work has been done. So it's fairly new, and we're still seeing a lot of progress and a lot of good things happening there. Next. Here are the numbers that I wanted to share with you guys, because I know some of you like numbers. So we have 700 species of native plants here in the dune and swale. 85 are globally rare and state significant. 200 species of bird, 18 confirmed nesting species globally and state significant. We hope those keep increasing. 14 mammals, 21 reptiles and amphibians, 8 are state rare, 60 different species of butterflies, 4 that are globally rare. And so just to show you, just a little bit over 500 acres is what we manage here and of dune and swale. And just to have this amount of diversity, and it just shows you that sometimes these small habitats, these small fragmented habitats is not enough. And that's where the urban conservation comes in for my project office. Next. I talk about urban conservation because these sites are in an urban environment. I showed you this picture before. There's a lot of challenges that come with this, with loss of habitat because of development and industry, fragmentation, also because of that, pollution, fire suppression, because we're in an urban environment, we need really specific requirements, really wind speeds, all of that in order to burn any of these sites. And as you might know or might not, a lot of our dune and swale and really our oak savanna habitats, they need fire. They're fire dependent. It really helps with diversity. Really helps with some of the vegetation, and so that does become a challenge. Invasives, you've seen how invasives can be a challenge, especially in urban environments when people are constantly bringing in exotic plants that they may not know if they're invasive or not to the yards. But it's not always negative. I also threw in green infrastructure because I didn't want to just talk about all negatives. There's possibility with urban environments that you can have, you can do green infrastructure, partner with cities, Chicago, Gary, and others to try to improve green infrastructure, prevent, stormwater runoff into our rivers and other things that can cause issue to the hydrology of some of these natural habitats, but not just that, but just also to the communities in which these places exist in. And then community and partnerships. These sites are within the communities and they are part of the community. So we're always trying to work with the community and because I try to see these as kind of like a landscape, bigger scale, larger scale. Although these sites are fragmented, they don't have to kind of stay within their natural boundaries there or the boundaries of the nature preserve. I always try to encourage people to plant native gardens, try to bridge some of those gaps that fragmentations have caused. These species, they already have a hard time traveling from one preserve to the other. It would be a lot easier for pollinators and other species if they sort of had, more of native vegetation that they're used to, just kind of between the gaps of our nature preserves. And then partnerships, I mentioned partnership because it's super important. We wouldn't have done the work that we have done. We wouldn't be where we are without our partnerships, and that includes other nonprofits, land conservations, and government relations. I mean, everything, all this work really requires everybody to work together, including you guys in the community and all the people. Next. I just wanted to share some things that, as I mentioned, we try to do with the community. We try to help with some tree plantings, partnering with organizations like SCA to do tree plantings. We do have the Monarch Festival where, it's not always all about science and it's not always all about, what we know, but sometimes it's also just as important to uplift the communities and the knowledge that's already there, like with the monarch butterfly and its connection to the people of Mexico and Michoacan, where the monarch overwinters, and there's so much knowledge there. And so we try to engage different kinds of different communities. And of course, I mentioned community gardens, native gardens, plant giveaways we try to do, and really try to work in this urban environment. Continue. The next one, I just show other things that we can do when we partner up with your local cities, like local policy, trying to be advocates for local policies, and like the calorie pair, like that's an invasive species. There's municipalities, cities that actually prevent you from planting that. Internships, we worked this past summer with actually IUN through the GLISTEN program to do some work in Gary. We also work with Gary to help them do urban forestry plan and things like that. You can do beyond just stewarding your land, and opportunities that come when your nature preserves are in an urban environment. Next. And lastly, I know that was a lot and really compressed, because really, and like I said, when I talked about my role here, there's really a lot to it. And so I only had 15 minutes, and I think I went a little bit over that. Feel free to reach me if you have any questions on any project or anything that we do. Like I said, it's really about working together, and together we can really accomplish anything. And I look forward to what we can do together as a community here in Northwest Indiana. Trevor, it's all yours.
Okay. Yeah, I'll be talking about the Efroymson restoration at Kankakee Sands. Yeah, just a little bit south of where Joel is there. So Kankakee Sands is it's a single preserve in an area that used to be called the Everglades of the North. That was part of the largest marsh system in the Midwest, and we kind of sit in the footprint of that. The primary ecosystems in our area are tallgrass prairie and remnant black oak savanna. This part of Northwest Indiana had a lot of prairie that spilled over into Illinois, and the black oak savannas in northern Indiana, especially along the Kankakee River, are largely, there's a lot of intact places and high quality habitats there that we're trying to protect. We introduced bison at our site back in 2016, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, which gets people excited. But there's a lot goes into bison management. And unlike Joel's area, a lot of our land was pretty rural and was farmed. There's not a lot of urban infrastructure in the way, but there is some. US 41 being a big one that runs right through our project. We do work closely with Friends of the Sands group. We do a lot of outreach and community events with them, and that's been really great for us. And staff are active land stewards, restoration ecologists. We have a lot of experience. And the cool thing is, I think none of us really started at Kankakee Sands. We all came to Kankakee Sands from somewhere else. So we have a variety of experiences, and it's just a cool place to work. Yeah, and we do also we have seasonal crews, we have interns, a lot of folks getting college credit for different things. And then we have a nice, robust volunteer program that really help us with all different facets of what we're trying to do at Kankakee Sands. So next. So yeah, briefly, so Trevor Edmonson, site manager, oversees all aspects of the project, kind of like Joel, just whatever our little field office goes through, I'm involved with it somehow, a lot there. Elisa Nyberg is our restoration ecologist, greenhouse manager. She does all the seed harvesting and processing, or she leads it. We all have a hand in that. And she does a lot of our outreach coordination. Jessica Gomez is a land steward, but she also manages our crew. She's does a lot of fire leadership as well for us, and various other things. Garrett Litweiler, he's a conservation technician. Equipment anything that needs worked on, or heavy machinery, or a lot of the bison stuff. Garrett is the guy for that. Got a lot of different skills. Olivia Scouten, she's also land steward. She co-manages our bison program, and is really good in vegetation surveys, and does a lot of presentations as well, and some good outreach stuff. So anyway, next. So Kankakee Sands today, all the area in green and the area to the north in the sort of the peach color there, the Conrad Station Savanna, are what we call Kankakee Sands, the Efroymson restoration. So those are the areas that our office manages. what's really cool about it, and you'll see the outline there of the historic Beaver Lake, which was the largest freshwater lake in Indiana back in the mid 1800s. It started to be drained. You can see there's a Beaver Lake ditch on there. It was kind of going through the map. So this lake was pretty big. Our site in total, we have about 8,400 acres that we're managing. But the lake was much larger than that, and it was a pretty shallow lake. You can imagine it being a lot of backwater marsh area, with sort of little oak savanna on the outside of it. There's a few islands in it that we can still find today in our bison pasture, where the oaks are growing there. But it must have been an amazing, just incredibly biodiverse place. Lots of birds and amphibians and reptile. I just can't imagine what it must have been like. But it was drained and turned over to farm and pasture ground for really up until the 1990s. So next. But why did we pick this project? Why are we here? I think, thinking about Joel's presentation here, the fragmentation of high quality habitats is a significant problem. And, it's rare that you have an opportunity to do natural area restoration at scale and to connect those pieces, kind of put them back together in some way. A lot of those species are bottlenecked in these little patches, these little postage stamps. They can't really leave their habitat. They can't move themselves easily. Not everything can fly. So Kankakee Sands, there was an opportunity there where there was thousands of acres for sale back in the 90s. And what we saw was an opportunity to connect 3 high quality natural areas there. Conrad Savanna, which is about 800 acres, Beaver Lake Nature Preserve, which was 640 acres, and Willow Slough Fish and Wildlife Area, which is now probably over 12,000 acres in total. So those 3 pieces were disconnected from one another. And we decided to try to connect them. So go next. And so what you can see is on the right-hand side, our approach to that. You can see the Willow Slough area labeled on the bottom there. You can see Conrad Savanna Nature Preserve, and you can see Beaver Lake Nature Preserve. We connected all 3 of those pieces in a meaningful way. And so that species now can go back and forth. We can move seed around. In particular, there's several species that we tried to target, but the Regal Fritillary is one that I'll mention a little bit later. It was only found in Indiana at Beaver Lake Nature Preserve before this project started. That was its home base, and it was kind of stuck there, where that being surrounded by cornfields and everything. So that's not good butterfly habitat. It needs its host plants and everything else. But also, it's also important to point out that, the ecology is greater than just the Indiana side in Newton County. What you can see here is on the left side is what's going on in Illinois, in Kankakee County and Iroquois County. These are also very high quality, a lot of nature preserves in Illinois, a lot of land and water reserves that are also supporting rare and endangered species and critical habitat. And if, this map doesn't show it, but if you were to go east, you would run into Jasper-Pulaski area and some other preserves that are also along the Kankakee River. North of us, LaSalle Fish and Wildlife Area is another good one. So within the region, there are lots of these little habitat fragments. And so if we can create this sort of network, they don't all have to be connected, but as long as they're in close proximity and they're restored to a high quality level, the species can thrive and we can work together to, assist their recovery. So Kankakee Sands this year, starting in December, the first land purchase was done in 1996. And you'll see some, this is our 25th year at the project. And here is a sort of a recent roadmap of how we got there. It's not easy to restore 8,000 acres of anything. let alone prairie from scratch in a lot of these places. So you can just see the different years that plantings were made in some of these areas. And what this doesn't really show is some of the overseeding that happened in other years, right? So there wasn't just to set it and forget it, you plant it one time. A lot of these areas had to be gone over a second time. And we may go over them a third time in some areas. It's hard to get seed to establish in a lot of these areas, but we've been really successful. But you know, over time, things change. You know, hydrology shifts a little bit, invasive treatments, etc. And so, but yeah, this is the roadmap of how we got to where we are today. Yeah. So why protect Kankakee Sands? I mentioned it a little bit before. There's so much diversity within the area. Newton County has over 86 rare, threatened, or endangered species, and we have about 10 different plant communities that make their home here that we're protecting. So it's not just kind of like, again, like Joel mentioned, you know, you have habitat for a variety of different species, different wetness, different structures, you know, from open marsh to black oak savanna to you know, sedge meadows to areas for cactus. I mean, we've got it all. Short grass prairie, tall grass prairie, you know, open sand prairie. You know, they all have a different role for a different species. And so when we can do that at scale, that makes a big difference. That we have good representation of all those habitats across our site. So anyway, next. Yeah, and total species supported, this is, you know, an estimate, but based on some of our surveys, you know, we have over 700 species of plants that have been found at Kankakee Sands. We're constantly putting in more seed, you know, to support these plants. If it makes sense for historically and regionally, you know, for our area. Moths, we've been doing a lot of moth surveys over the years. We've had some really great volunteers do that, and we've documented over 1,000 species of moths, which, you know, there's probably a couple thousand really that could be found in our area. So there's more to find, and a lot of those are very specialized. They require specialized plants, specialized habitat, and they don't happen by chance, right? You got to have that structure in place for them. Bees, there's probably more bees, but you know, 155 species is pretty good, I would say. But I know within the Chicago wilderness area, there's over 400. So different bee species. Butterflies, I'm really happy about that. We have over 70 different species, including the state endangered Regal Fritillary as, you know, as our home base there. Ants, don't know much about those, but pretty good. And birds, you know, I think one thing that's easy for people to connect with is the variety of bird species we have. You know, kind of like as Joel mentioned, we have about a third of our site to a half, I would say, is wetlands. So we do get those secretive marsh birds passing through on their way to Joel or on you know, coming down after visiting him, depending on which way they're going. But we also, you know, we'll get a lot of the grassland specific birds. You know, you'll see a lot of birds at your feeder, right, that are in trees or bushes, which we have some of those, but there are a lot of birds that require open grasslands, and most of our grasslands have been destroyed, and they don't have birds require very specific nesting requirements, habitat structure, and so grassland birds and shrubland birds are some of the rarest birds in North America. That ecosystem that they rely on is so the fact that we can provide that, we got a lot of unique birds because of that. Next. So here's the Regal Fritillary. Previously, like I said, only found at Beaver Lake Nature Preserve. We've done surveys the last several years, and can happily say that the numbers have been increasing, at least since I've been here. I've only been here a few years now, not even, I can't even say that, really only 2, but the data I've seen, that the butterfly has been increasing every year, and we can now find it during our annual summer surveys in every unit that we do our surveys in. So at least one butterfly shows up, but now we're seeing, you know, really high numbers when we'll go out and do like 30-second or 30-minute meandering surveys in these identified areas. You know, so that's a good sign. That means that they're moving around, they're finding nectar sources, and hopefully they're they're finding their host plant. They use a couple different violet species, and so we're trying to plant more violets and yeah, encourage that butterfly success. This butterfly is up for federal listing next fall, so we're watching that. We did find this year for the first time that the butterfly was documented near Jasper Pulaski area in the Nipsco Savanna Preserve, which is exciting because that means it's emanating, it's doing what we hoped it would. It's leaving sort of the Kankakee Sands area and going and finding new habitat, right? It needs to be robust to be able to do that. And so our population is going up. And that's rare these days with insects, especially to have, it's a struggle. So, we do a lot of different stewardship things. It's not just, like I said, set it and forget it. We got to be pretty active constantly about being good stewards of the land. A lot of that requires invasive species removal throughout most of the spring and summer. And then we'll be transitioning to sort of invasive brushwork this winter. We probably treat, different, not, touching at least half of our preserve every year in some way, manual, getting out there and doing the work. We do a lot of prescribed burning. Our goal, I like to say, is 2,000 acres every year. If we're 8,000 acres and we burn 2,000, that means we're burning a quarter of it every year, and we're leaving 3/4 unburned for habitat. So I think that's a good, healthy rotation for what we're trying to do. Some areas get burned a little bit more, some areas don't get burned as much, but on average, I think that's a good goal for us, and it's really what we can manage with our staff. Any more than that would just be, we'd need some more folks. So yeah, but that's the core of what we're doing. Here's a good photo from last year. This was in Unit H. And you can see the nice clean line, which I like to point out to folks. A lot of folks just think we light the prairie on fire and walk away. But we have a lot of training and we have a lot of specialized equipment. That pumper unit there, that UTV has a nozzle on the front to spray water in front of the tire, and it's got a 50-gallon back. And we got like 7 or 8 vehicles like that, and plus trucks out there. So you can see we were trying to light the stuff in the black on fire, not the other side. So we put a little wet line down there. And we had people following behind it. So it usually creates these nice clean lines like that if we've done it right. So next. Yeah, this is another, I just couldn't help that. But you can see our pumper unit in the back there. Like I said, so one person, I think I was driving that at the time and back patrolling, just in case there were any embers that were coming across our line that I could easily put them out while the fire was still active. So yeah, next. Yep, and we got the return of bison in 2016. So the bison were never part of the original plan at Kankakee Sands. It was only after we got the scale that we needed, and TNC moved in that direction where they were trying to reintroduce bison to different preserves. But it made sense because historically the bison were in Indiana, and we're east of Indiana. Yeah, here we go. So you can see sort of the range as of the late 1800s was over into Appalachia, and so Indiana is well part of that. But then it was very restricted. You can see the really dark, sort of dark red circles. That was what was, as of the late 1800s. I mean, there were just a few spots where there were wild bison at all outside of their historic range. So next. Yeah, and I think there's a bison on the Indiana state seal as well. So definitely native to Indiana. So bison facts, a couple, they can live up to 20 to 40 years. They mature at 3 years, 1 calf per season. They have a 9-month term as well. Our largest, they're big animals, and but one other thing is both the genders have horns, which is kind of confusing to folks sometimes. Yeah. Let's see, the bison pasture and fencing. Yeah, so our bison, you can see a little bit of our shop there on the left, where we do all our work at, but the bison themselves, are in about 1,000-acre pasture. We divide up in the north and south, with our office sort of in the middle and our corral system right in the middle. So we can rotate them between the two. The whole idea with the bison is about grazing and habitat structure. It's not about, them being really cool to look at, which they are, and people love that. But they do play a role in the prairie, a significant role, providing a lot of habitat. So next. Yeah, so their strength in diversity and ecology, and the bison are a tool of disturbance, just like fire is. Disturbs the prairie, but also regenerates new things. And the bison were brought in for that effect. They really liked grazing on tall grasses, big blue stem, Indian grass, things like that. And if without that grazing component, it's often, if you're in a restoration, those grasses tend to take over. And what it does is it lowers the diversity of some of the other flowering plants, the forbs and things. So in a remnant prairie, which we don't have a lot of, there are other factors that play often as well that help with that. But the bison, for restorations, I think, are critical in creating that disturbance. And so more flowers means more diverse insects and pollinators. It provides more short grass habitat for birds and other insect biodiversity. Some insects prefer open sandy soils. Tiger beetles, for example, are another good one that you're gonna find them out in that open sand. And the patchy nature of their grazing creates a nice mosaic to prescribe burning. So it won't burn everything. It'll create natural little refugia of unburned patches because just the way the bison graze. The wallows so the bison like to roll around on their back and create these big open sand pockets. And that creates spaces for little annual plants, species, amphibians, and just succession to begin anew. A lot of our small violet species require a lot of sunlight. So those open sandy patches from the wallows could be a good spot for them to get started, right? And the bison move those wallows around every year. So, when it rains, those little depressions the bison create, can be good for toads and frogs and things. Salamanders, we got tiger salamanders out in our bison pasture. So, they can all use those things. Yeah. So we have dung beetles. Without bison there, our dung beetle population wouldn't be as great. That's the diversity that stuff that people don't talk about as much, but there's these unseen layers of diversity that feed back onto each other. Northern harrier is in there. That's another a bird that likes those sort of lower structured marsh areas, and the bison can go in there and help that. Next. Every year, a lot of people ask about, how do we handle the bison? They are wild. Our bison came from Wind Cave National Park, so we don't handle them unless we have to, because like I said, they're not domesticated bison. They're wild animals, and wild animals do not like to be confined for any reason. So we try to limit that to just one day a year, where we partner with the Indianapolis Zoo and we do a vet day, and we have to give them health checkups basically, and if there's something we have to administer to them, like a vaccine or something that might be mandated, we'll go ahead and do that. But it really, we learn a lot about our herd. We get figure out how much they weigh. We figure out, if there's any injuries or anything like that. Just like I said, general health checkup. We count our bison at that time. There's a lot of times we don't know how many bison are actually out there, because during calving season, they can hide out there. So we get a good, nice count of our bison. Believe we're at 93 currently. We just did our roundup last week. Our largest animal was 1,850 pounds. Our smallest was 215 pounds. So that would have been a first-year calf that would have been born in likely May. So that's a pretty big animal, and but you can see the difference there. That the very first year animals. I mean, that's a pretty 215. That's still a big animal, but they get much bigger. So, and how dangerous it is. It's a really interesting thing to be around. But anyway, I think that's hopefully that's a good overview of what we do. We have a lot of visitor access. We have several parking lots and several trails at our site. And we do try to interact with the public, especially at our bison viewing area where we have volunteer rangers, which you'll see there in the orange vest there, where they set up and do some good bison interpretive stuff. We do have regular volunteer days, which Esmé will talk about, I think, in a second here. A lot of different, if you're interested in helping out, there's a lot of different roles and things, and want to learn more. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Trevor, for covering that. I know we've talked a lot about different ecologies and biodiversity, and now you might be wondering, how do I get involved, or what do I do next? What's my role in all of this? And I know you guys are community garden participants, which means you already are interested in getting your hands dirty and perhaps helping steward the natural world. And so there's two primary ways that I share opportunities to volunteer or, do an internship. And that would be shared online on our website, which has just gone through a revamp. So now it's a little bit more user-friendly, or in email newsletters. And you can sign up for the newsletter on our website or by emailing me. But if you're interested in something specific, like you are dying to know more about the Bison program, reaching out to Trevor would be a great way to get more information about that. You can also reach out to TNC staff if you have a specific skill that you're looking to contribute. I know we've had in the past volunteers who have helped us with GIS, mapping our preserves, checking on their boundaries, doing things like that. So if you have a professional skill that you want to contribute, there might be a match for you. So that's always a possibility too. And so we have two kinds of volunteers, really. We have those committed volunteers or interns who are matched with a specific staff member who has a particular project, a particular need, who then oversees that person on an ongoing basis. So that's typically relatively time limited. You might be helping out for a 1-year project or a 2-year internship, something like that. But there's also, if you only have a few hours to give, those single day events where you can come out, get your hands dirty, do it for 3 hours, know you've made an impact. But if that's all the time you have to give, that's still wonderful. And those are with stewardship staff, typically doing seed harvesting or cleaning. You might do invasive removal, you might do tree planting, depending on where you're at. Those are really hands-on experiences. And some of those are youth-friendly, and it really depends on what's being done. Usually herbicide is the defining feature of whether or not youth are able to attend. But that's always clear when you're looking at our opportunities. Youth do need parental approval, and typically youth come with their families. So if you are a parent or you want to bring your younger sibling who's under 18, sometimes you can do that depending on what is available. And I just want to mention, COVID restrictions are in place right now. We don't have any indoor activities for volunteers. Maybe in the spring we'll be reassessing that. We also have lots of hand sanitizer available, and we do have people wearing masks when they're closer than 6 feet. So if you're thinking about your safety, we have those protocols in place on purpose. We want to make sure you have a positive experience when you come out with us, be it 1 time or 25 times. I'm going to share one specific role that I actually am actively looking for volunteers for. There's a current need for 1 or 2 social media specialists. So this is a committed role. You'd be working with our marketing staff. It's a statewide position, so you'd be helping us with our social media for the whole state. It's remote right now, so you do get to work from your house. There's a flexible schedule. And essentially what it is you get to do content creation for our TNC Indiana accounts, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, or for our Children of Indiana Nature Park, which is a special preserve way close to Ohio, like maybe 10 minutes from the Ohio border. But it has a special program as well because it talks about youth a lot more. And this is really a great opportunity if you're thinking, I can't get out to some of your preserves or those 1-day events, but I love doing, storytelling and digital photography, things like that. This might be a great opportunity for you. You get to practice brand management, you get to practice using photographs to tell stories, and you further our connection with Hoosiers across the state. So it's a really amazing opportunity. you're interested, email me and I would love to speak more with your interest, about your interest. But again, like I said, if that's not how much time you have to give and you don't have a couple hours each week, that's okay. There's also single day volunteers, and there's actually one coming up on Saturday. So winter work day. No experience is needed. You will be doing some invasive removal. The only thing you do need is a willingness to get a little cold because it's probably going to be pretty chilly. So you're going to get out there doing some invasive tree removal, which means like hands-on, loppers, you're wearing gloves and cutting down trees that don't belong there. And that's with Olivia Schwinn at Kankakee Sands. In the spring, there'll be way more available across the state. A lot of people start to heat up, especially around April for Earth Day. So all of those events, they range from a whole host of different kinds of tasks, anything you can imagine. And those are all going to be on that website or shared via the newsletter. So those are the two primary ways that you can learn about opportunities close to your home, maybe close to your family's home. If you're away for a weekend visiting them, still can come out with us. So those are something to note. Kankakee Sands is perhaps the single most regular in its volunteer opportunities because it has them on Saturdays and Thursdays pretty consistently. So if you're willing to drive a little bit, that's always a wonderful place to go because then you can see bison at the end of your event, which are very cool to see in person. I can attest, Trevor let me see some bison way too close back in the summer. It was amazing. So next steps, connect with us about your specific interests. Please do add your name and email to the newsletter. I love to reach new people, especially connected with urban gardens. It means you already are interested in this work and I'd love to get you out with us. There's trails at Ivanhoe South Nature Preserve. You can go and hike. Winter hiking has lots of bird watching opportunities. So there's still things to see even when the leaves are all gone. Of course, you can always visit the bison. They're pretty notable. And Trevor just mentioned there's about 93 of them now. So there's lots and lots of animals to take a look at. And in the spring, come out and do a volunteer day or two. So those are your next steps, my asks for all of you. And here's our contact information. I'm going to leave it up here for a second, and I'm sure Amanda will distribute our contact info at the end. But there's one thing on here I wanted to note is if you don't know who your best contact is, I'm probably your best first person to reach out to. And if it's not me, I will directly funnel you to the appropriate staff member. But just note that we're all very available and we want to hear from folks at IU Northwest. So please do reach out if you have any questions. Thank you also, by the way, for spending your evening talking to us and learning more about the ecologies of Northwest Indiana.